Good evening, everyone. On behalf of Geo Institute, I, Cleston DeCosta, welcome you all to another powerful and knowledge-packed masterclass. Our topic for today is the future of journalistic storytelling with AR and VR. And what can you expect from today's masterclass? What do we have outlined for you? So right now, this session is for journalists and all others who are keen to learn about the next wave of computing and publishing platform, which is AR and VR, and how it enhances immersive scale of storytelling. In this session, what you will learn is how AR and VR can make storytelling interactive and engaging for consumers. You'll learn the basics of XR of content creation, choosing the right platform to publish a story, and how to market and reach a wider audience. We'll also have a collaborative brainstorming session to understand the journalism ideas floating in the room and validate each use case for immersive technology. But who's going to take the session is more important. Who we have with us today is Ishika Gupta. Now, if I may quickly introduce Ishika Gupta. Ishika is a video journalist who turned into an AR and VR technologist, and she brings harmony between the two disciplines. She has a degree in multimedia and mass communication from IP College, Delhi University, and a Master of Science in Journalism from Columbia University in the city of New York. Since she has covered the 2016 US presidential election with the Huffington Post in New York, led the APAC social media operations at the CNBC in Singapore, and strategized content for Ascend, Harvard Business Review's millennial product, which is focused on providing practical advice to young professionals. Presently, she's leading content partnerships for Geo Tesseract, Geo's AR/VR company. And she has built the world's third largest XR app store and create a community from scratch, and which is passionate about bringing the next generation of computing into the hands of consumers. Ishika uses data-driven insights to strategically partner with AR and VR creators who build meaningful applications for Geo's XR products. So this is quite an exciting bio and quite interesting. I'm looking forward to hearing more from you, Ishika. Over to you.
Thank you, Cleston. That was a very sweet introduction. Hello to everyone who's attending the session. Lovely to meet all of you, and thank you for taking out time on a Wednesday evening and joining the session. I'm here to talk about journalism and AR/VR. My main education has been in journalism, and I've been working in the XR industry for the last 3 years. And storytelling and AR/VR and the commercialization of content are some of my key passion areas that I'm very much interested and keen to bring into the larger space and at a larger consumer scale. So I'm going to quickly share my screen and start sharing some of the content. But as I do that, I'm just very keen to understand and learn from all of you. How many of you here are practicing journalists, and how many of you here are students who are keen to learn about this platform and then eventually kind of take it into a different profession? Cleston, is it possible for you to please run a poll for that?
Yeah, just doing that right now.
So Cleston has put forward this question, which asks you if you're familiar with AR/VR. So, if you have, for example, dabbled into this technology before, I would love to learn so that I can just gauge what kind of an audience you all are, and how I can sort of address you best, and what is the kind of knowledge that I can impart you. If not, then also happy to kind of start from scratch and give you some understanding of what the space is. And yeah, so please go ahead and answer this question. Would just love to get some basic understanding.
Okay, with this, I can go to the next question to identify how many students are there or how many practitioners.
Yes, definitely.
So this is the result of the current poll.
Okay, perfect, great. So some of you are already aware of AR/VR, which is great. Some of you aren't, and some of you have dabbled into the space, but are not exactly sure if that's AR/VR or not. No problem. We'll walk through everything.
Yeah. Going on to the next poll.
So yeah, this question by question helps me understand if you're a student and you're keen to move into XR or the journalism industry, or if you're an industry practitioner who is just keen to learn about the next phase of the internet and how you can enhance and upskill your journalistic skills. So if you're any of these, just please answer this question.
Those who are marked as others can put your option or your area of interest in the box below, or your profession in the box, in the Q&A box.
And of course, the Geo Institute is also starting with a journalism program where we will be hosting an AR/VR lab. So if you're a prospective student also, this is a great space to just understand what the potential of the space could be. Oh, interesting. So most of you are either students, or you're not industry practitioners, or you're from some other industry, but you're keen to just learn about storytelling. Okay, great, awesome. So let me quickly jump into the whole session and start with explaining to you what I'll be discussing today. So a couple of things here. I am, as Cleston mentioned, I'm leading the whole content partnerships here at Geodeseract. What that essentially means is that we're a platform company, something similar to what Oculus is. And as any platform or ecosystem goes, everybody requires content, because content, irrespective, is king. The technology could be as beautiful, as handy, and as easy as possible, but if the content is not accessible to users, it doesn't make sense. So that's what I primarily do. I am building a lot of content, but my journey to that stage has been slightly interesting. So I'll tell you how I started at this space. Just a moment. Yeah. So basically, in 2016, what had happened was that Oculus was bought by Facebook, which is now Meta. And at that time, this whole XR industry, people still believe that it's not at the forefront. But at that time, it got a little bump. Through that whole curve, it got a little bump because when a big tech company makes an acquisition and investment into a certain technology, just how ChatGPT is doing the rounds these days. Similarly, at that time, that was the point for VR. And I was at that time in New York, and at the forefront of really building AR and VR 360 journalistic content. So specifically 360 documentaries. So that was at the time when we would use 6 GoPro cameras attached to a rig, and clapping hands to sync the shots with one another. We would, you can see the kind of hard drives that, we were using for storage of each of these different video clips that we would have. We would stitch each and every clip together and, spend hours in an editing room trying to edit the whole thing together. And at that time, of course, the HMDs were not as, affordable or accessible as they are today. So we would use these cardboard HMDs and insert our content into it and view it to understand how we are progressing with our production. And that this whole 3-month effort, really resulted in a VR documentary, which was about 7 minutes long, where we covered 3 different characters going through homelessness and, coming together for a dinner at a church and, just intermingling and just trying to understand how people deal with homelessness in a big city like New York. So this was, this 3-month effort was a process which took place, sometime back in 2016. But now when fast forward, we look in this year, 2023, this whole process is shortened. Now, some of this content can be, processed in a time span of say about maximum 24 hours or even 48 hours, because the technology in the last 7 years has evolved. Not just the technology, but also the hardware through which people consume this content has become easily accessible, it's affordable. And through that, what we do here is that, we are basically not just dealing with 360 VR content, but an array of metaverse content, which is called XR. So that whole industry, the umbrella term for it is called extended reality. And within extended reality, there are 3 different components, which is augmented reality, virtual reality, and mixed reality. What virtual reality essentially does is that once you wear one of those HMDs, it basically encompasses you within a completely different environment, and you are blocked from any real environment in which you're currently placed. So through that, there is a lot of emotion, there's a lot of empathetic viewing, there's a lot of a sense that you're transported into a completely different world. What augmented reality does is that along with your real world, you can also see digital content overlaid on top of it. Fairly easy. Say, for example, you wear these glasses and then, you can see this whole presentation in a video format, but you can also see, for example, your living room or your bedroom or your classroom, wherever you're sitting right in front of it. What mixed reality does is that it is an extension of augmented reality. Now, say, for example, there's this, glass of water. In augmented reality, I will see this glass along with my real environment. But in mixed reality, what happens is that this particular glass of water, I can place in conjunction with my actual environment. So it basically recognizes the space. It does a recognition of the kind of environment in which I am, and it will place these digital objects in conjunction with that entire space. So it recognizes through the location and through the different digital points of the objects and places them together. Then coming to what we do here at Tesseract. So I'm part of Tesseract, which is Jio's AR/VR company. And we have been in this space for the last 7 years now. And, we've been kind of starting with the whole, the capture side, which is camera, going into a miniaturized version of that same camera, to building the world's first smartphone based AR headset, which got us into the whole Reliance ecosystem. And in 2020, we came out with GeoGlass, which created a lot of uproar across the world that, India as a country is building, XR ecosystem, because we have, as a country, primarily been known to, build software, but never known to build hardware. But this is the first time that, we are kind of leapfrogging the whole, smartphone era and building something which is for the metaverse, for the XR, not just from India, but for the world also. And, what happens is that through the whole Reliance AGM, we basically came into that whole global stage where, we had these glasses, and along with glasses, we had our own hardware, software, and content. And, as you can see from this slide, it was all over the news. And not just the news, we also had to, deal with a lot of this, which is, basically 3 days of, endless bantering on social media and a lot of memes. We were trending across social media for as #1 for 3 days, and that's a huge achievement given that we're a small AR/VR company building content and a whole ecosystem out of this country. Then coming to the hero of this entire ecosystem, which is GeoGlass. So it's basically like an AR device, which has excellent clarity. We have a personal theater-like feature, which enables you to view content as if you're sitting in a private theater. It's a very light and an ergonomical device, which weighs only about 75 grams. And it easily plugs in with your smartphone, and you can use it for at least 2 hours and watch an entire film on it. So this GeoGlass is part of a larger ecosystem, which is called the Tesseract platform. So what this essentially does is that we have our devices layer, we have our own OS in cloud, we have content, and then we have applications across gaming, learning, productivity, shopping. And then of course the most beautiful thing about being part of the whole Geo ecosystem is that we have in-house connectivity of 4G, 5G, and fiber. So let me just try and help you understand in rather simple terms of how you could equate the metaverse to what kind of a technology you already have access to currently. So your smartphones, right? So for example, your smartphone is just the hardware. There is an underlying software on it. And then you have a Play Store or an App Store, which basically gives you access to millions of content on it. Now, if you think about your smartphone, you only it's just the hardware which you probably carry in your pocket or your bags, etc. But the reason why you're probably spending about 3 to 4 hours on it daily is because you have content on it. You have Instagram, you have WhatsApp, you have YouTube, you have Netflix. So similarly, currently your relationship with computers is through a small device called your smartphone, or through something which is your laptop. And these are mostly 2D screens. But when you think about what next after a laptop or a smartphone, you will realize that it's all based on improving your relationship with technology in a way where you're not only kind of interacting with it on a through some inputs which are on a keyboard or on your smartphone's touch screen, but it's actually interacting with the content in itself. So that's how you progress with the evolution of content. And through that is basically what the metaverse is. It's basically like an amalgamation of all your experiences, of all your content, of software, everything coming together in a way wherein you are at one with the technology and with computers itself. Not just what Geo as a platform or as an ecosystem offers metaverse features, but these are some of the key features that you will find in any platform or any ecosystem which is building on top of a metaverse platform. So basically it has multi-screen productivity. It will allow you to interact with different devices. It becomes ubiquitous. The whole processing for the metaverse happens through cloud. It has to be 5G ready, because since we, not just India, but across the world, we have moved on from 4G to 5G. It requires us to also create experiences which consume high bandwidth and low latency. We require chipsets which are very specifically made for XR platforms. Wherein Qualcomm as a company is building the XR2 chipset, and these are the kind of chipsets which are required to build very high power devices. They have to be lightweight, they have to be ergonomic, because if they're not comfortable devices, then they will ultimately, you will not be able to spend time on it. Then we need spatial audio also has to be in a way where where you can exactly understand where the audio and the content is coming from, and sort of get a sense of that direction and follow through it, so that it makes you feel that you're actually immersed in the content itself. Then there are different SDK, software development kits, which are available for building an XR. There are avatars. Mark Zuckerberg, through his platform, often talks about presence. He talks about being able to talk to each other in an environment where you're in an avatar format. So similarly, not just on the Oculus format, on the Oculus metaverse, every kind of metaverse, there will be your digital identities, there will be avatars, which will be customized depending on your identity, and you will be able to interact through that avatar with other people in a digital environment. And then of course we have SLAM, because what happens in this is that this requires our technology to very much actively involve and work with our environments in our space. So it requires a lot of SLAM and GPU processing, which will interact with our space and we will become one with it. So just to give you some idea of what kind of content we have built so far. XR is a new space, but there's a growing set of developers or content creators which are specifically called AR/VR developers. So for example, when you build content for mobiles, there are you have Android developers, you have iOS developers, but AR/VR has very specifically XR developers who are trained in Unity or Unreal, or they build for web platforms like 3JS, Play Canvas, etc. So what these developers have done is that they have chosen to become part of our platform, and we have signed up with almost 10,000 of those. We have shortlisted about 700 concepts. We have onboarded 500 of those developers, and we have built a curated app store of about 150 to 200 applications. And we have an actively growing community of creators who are specifically building for AR/VR on a Discord channel, which is at this point in time more than 800 creators. Now, if you look at this app store, we have content across learning, productivity. We have a lot of games. We have a lot of learning content and a lot of games, and we have this thing also, health and wellness content. So these are primarily the kind of use cases which are driving the whole XR space. But having said that, when we think about journalistic content, what happens is that it can either come as a standalone content, or just to get started with that kind of content, it can also come in conjunction with some of the existing titles that we already have. I'll come on this, I'll explain this in detail in the coming slides. So what happens when you as a creator or anybody as a creator wants to come and join for a platform, they will always kind of give you some value propositions. They will also try to explain to you why it's so important to build for a particular platform. So one is, of course, there are some key benefits that come with building for Geo. For example, it has the widest reach when it comes to its accessibility through 4G, which has about 500 million users. On fiber, we have close to 20 million enterprises and 50 million households, and 5G is also growing in speed. So we give you access to a very wide variety of an audience. We have high bandwidth and low latency also facilities available with our fiber and 5G services. We have a very developer friendly SDK. We're giving you access to the largest XR app store and ad platform through Geo. We have a specific mixed reality cloud storage. We have a support team that will guide you through your entire development process. We also give guidance and mentorship on how to build whatever your idea may be. We will always guide you and tell you how to build that for our idea, for our platform. We give you marketing and outreach support, and of course, early access to dev days. We have also been conducting certain, learning and upskilling initiatives through our program, which is, we've been kind of running networking sessions across different AR/VR platforms. We have also been conducting podcasts wherein we get a lot of AR/VR experts onto our audio platforms, and then we give them a lot of they give you insights, for example, how to what kind of opportunities are available in this space, how you can bring content not just to urban areas but rural areas. How do you kind of monetize your content? How do you commercialize your content? How do you start from scratch when you want to build for AR/VR, and then you scale it up from there? This is also available on all major platforms, which is Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. So if you ever feel like just kind of dabbling into the space and learning from some experts, you can always go to any of these major platforms and search for Humans of XR, and you'll find this there. Now, coming to the end product that we have, or what any kind of AR major product looks like, it is basically like these glasses which come with a visor, some nose pieces, some prescription lenses. And they have three key features. The first one is smartphone screencast. So for example, some of the major applications that you use on your smartphone at this point in time are YouTube, Netflix, Disney, Amazon, etc. for OTT viewing. That's where majority of your time would be spent, or even YouTube. So what happens is that you can now easily plug in any of these glasses, especially Geo Glass, into your smartphone and use it as a personal theater. So it becomes like a personal viewing experience for you. The second thing is that, you can plug it in with your laptop and it becomes like a multi-screen productivity, except like you become something, like Iron Man, wherein there are 5 screens in front of you. You can navigate through them, you wearing these glasses. And then of course, while we have some of these entry points have been the laptop and the screen and the smartphone, we also have native content, which is what I will talk later about. Native content is what is, eventually going to drive the metaverse or AR/VR space in general. And we have given access to about 100 to 150 applications across different categories that, you can use, and you can start at least experimenting with what AR/VR content can be. It's majorly for entertainment seekers, tech enthusiasts, and for those who love to watch movies privately. And this whole product is what we took to launch at the India Mobile Congress this year in October, wherein we were, the first time that India was, again put on the global stage, where we launched across 5G services GeoGlass, which is a great use case because 5G needs upselling. And, for anybody who wants to upgrade from a 4G to a 5G use case, they would need glasses. It became so popular to an extent where GeoGlass is now almost synonymous with what 5G is. So yes, across we were on the front page of all major newspapers, on every on every live news channel. All ministers, business and media executive came, close to 100,000 in numbers, who experienced this product. If you were in Delhi at the India Mobile Congress, I'm sure you would have also heard about GeoGlass and given access and the demo of the same device. So coming to, I've so far, discussed what the whole platform is, what its capabilities are, how we've built the whole developer ecosystem and the content part of it. What I now want to discuss is something which is very important for anybody who's creating content, is to learn from what the customer is actually doing with this content or with this platform. Because ultimately it's the, when we talk about anything, by, be it us as a platform company or you as a creator or a journalist who's creating content, the one thing that always comes to our mind is, how are we going to earn revenue through this, or how are we going to be able to commercialize this content? Now, which is where the customer trials and the customer in general is very important, to be able to really get a sense of where are they spending their time, how are they really interacting with AR, VR, and what kind of content are they really keen to explore with this kind of a medium. Because because since this is the first time that we're introducing a technology like this in a country like India, so we're able to get these insights, we'll be able to really build on top of that content and on those insights, and be able to provide meaningful and delightful content that can actually be used by the consumers. So some insights that we have been able to gather through our customer trials. One is that through these XR glasses, people are currently able to spend about 15 to 20 minutes on it daily. Then the second thing is that gaming and fitness are the two categories which they love to interact with. Gaming is like casual gaming, something like a Candy Crush or something like a simple shooting game. They love to spend hours on it. For example, we have this application called Blitz Trooper. And Blitz Trooper is something like a retro shooter game, but it's such an addictive game that people are just spending like hours on it, despite the battery discharge or some of the discomfort that such kind of devices cause initially. But it's going above and beyond that. Then fitness is something which is very, very interesting to people, because what happens in fitness is that first of all, there's an avatar, like a yoga avatar, a yoga instructor's avatar, which comes in front of you, and they're able to guide you step by step on how to conduct certain asanas or how to conduct certain exercises. Now, for example, if you're somebody who likes to work out at home and you have access to a personal trainer, then that gives you access to range of exercises that you can do in a guided format. Then they love to, for example, spend a lot of their media time on these glasses, especially right before bedtime or for early morning rises, because they feel like this is a new technology that they have to use. So they specifically take out time right before their bedtime or right after they wake up, depending on if you're an early to bed person or a night owl. but they're keen. There's a lot of interest and a lot of enthusiasm to try this kind of a technology. And then of course, like, if there are popular brands, especially when it comes to content, which also comes in an XR format, they're very, very happy to explore that route as well. The major age group which is very interested in this kind of a content comes under the 21 and 39. They are usually upper middle class tier 1 city households which have heavy internet plans. So for example, of course, having said that, that is mostly an entry point, not the exact consumer base, but a great sort of like a segment which has the spending capacity to spend on a new technology, given that it's not going to be as affordable initially, which Geo will eventually take care of. But it's a great entry point to understand the kind of like, users who are very interested to try it out. And then of course, OTT is very big when it comes to AR/VR, because it gives you a sense of familiarity with the content which already exists with you. And if you're able to view that same content in an AR/VR format, it makes it easier for you to adapt a new technology as well. So coming to, this is mostly what I wanted to cover majorly about how a metaverse platform is essentially built, wherein, we drive everything from how the hardware is built, which is GeoGlass, how we build content on top of it, how do we kind of go to a customer, and then try and gather insights as to how are they spending time and their money on, their money on it. Now, the second part of this session that I want to cover is basically on how do you build content. Now, while this content is primarily driven across use cases like gaming or learning, entertainment, health and wellness, productivity, but journalism is an equally important category, which unfortunately or fortunately has not been a mainstream category in AR/VR so far. But through the session and through multiple learning experiences and through a lot of like skill development initiatives which are happening across the country, we are very excited and looking forward to see if there are some ideas which can come from this cohort itself. So when it comes to AR/VR and content creation, it starts with two simple steps. The first is understanding if you want to build your content or your application in AR or in VR. When you think about building your content in AR, you need to understand that it has to be something which will enhance your existing environment. It has to be agile, and it has to be, the graphics quality has to be beautiful, and it has to enhance the information that you already have access to. In VR, what happens is that this is the kind of content where you will immerse the user in an environment which is completely different for them. It increases empathy, it is a lot more immersive, and it is also very much in a space where you have to decide if you want to change, you want to move towards an AR platform, or you want to build towards a VR platform, or the kind of use case that you're building, more or less. So what happens in that case is that first you have to know what your audience is. What kind of a product are you building? Is it a consumer application? Is it an enterprise application? And what's the usual cost of a device? Now, to give you some kind of an examples here, in augmented reality, we have HMDs. Like HMDs is basically called a head mounted device. A head mounted device is any device that you basically wear on top of your head and it covers your eyes. So just giving you some examples of the HMDs that we already have in the market. We have GeoGlass, which is our proprietary VR glasses. Then we have Lenovo is a major company which is building such a product. We have Nreal in the market, which is also, kind of partnering with a lot of telcos across the world and bringing their glasses into the whole space. Then in terms of VR, we have, I'm sure all of you must have heard of Oculus, those who are familiar with the space. We have HTC Vive, we have Microsoft HoloLens, which is primarily mixed reality, a mix of both AR and VR. So these are the major companies which are, building in this space. Google some years ago had the Daydream, and Samsung had the Gear VR. So most of these tech companies are already building in this space, but some of these the major players out there right now are Oculus, then there's us, and then there's Nreal, and then there's Lenovo, who are building some of the major products. So what you need to decide is like, what kind of accessibility of device will my audience get when I build content for them? Is it primarily for a limited audience, which is enterprise, or is it for a larger audience, which is consumer? And is my audience, which kind of a device will my audience most have access to? So that's majorly the whole HMD market. But of course, there are mobile headsets also, which give a lot of AR and VR capabilities, primarily AR, given that AR works in conjunction with cameras, and they give you access to a wide variety of content creation tools as well. Then the second most important thing is, once you've decided your HMD, the kind of development platform that you want to use. The second one comes what kind of a development toolkit you want to use, wherein we talk about Unity and Unreal, which are the two most popular AR/VR development platforms. We also have native Android and iOS, which is ARKit and AR Core. But if you really want to build something long lasting for the metaverse, I will highly recommend building in either Unity or Unreal. One caveat, if you're not a technical developer, then is that both Unity and Unreal also require coding in languages like C# and C++. So if if you as an individual journalist or a creator does not have access to these skills, then you can partner with a freelance developer who's well skilled in these kind of technologies. And if not, then you can also kind of hire the right kind of a team for yourself who is well versed in these development platforms. So a couple of things that you should definitely keep in mind once you're selecting a development platform is, how comfortable are you to working with this technology? How your target audience is basically going to consume your content, and what kind of accessibility to this hardware do they already have? And with new hardware constantly being released and more software solutions coming available, consumer uptake in general is going to increase, because there are certain limitations because of which AR/VR has not been able to take off so far. The first one has been, of course, the accessibility to hardware. Because of course they're clunky, and then they're kind of expensive, they're not available in India. But then besides that, the other thing which is really important for HMDs to scale is also connectivity. So if you have high bandwidth, low latency networks like 5G or fiber available, that is also a major factor in really empowering and processing some of these experiences at a larger scale. So next, I'm going to talk about the key components of building AR and VR content. So first of all, you need to, as usual, decide what your target audience is. I'm sure this is the same principle that everybody uses when building any type of content, be it a YouTube viral video or a journalist or an investigative piece. Then the second thing that you kind of decide is what your description of your application is, or what kind of a content do you actually are envisioning to kind of build. What will be its features, as in how will the user be able to interact with it? What kind of leaderboards will you have? What kind of experiences do you want to give your audience access to? Then you have to define what kind of a content do you want to kind of cover in it. And this kind of finalizes your scope and delivery timelines. Delivery timelines is essentially to understand what kind of a timeline will you be taking to build that whole AR and VR content, which in our experience, takes about around about 3 months from the ideation conception stage to the point where you have your content ready. Any basic application takes about 3 months, and if it's a very in-depth content, then it takes a lot of additional sort of iterations on top of it. But this is primarily 3 months deciding the features, the content to be covered, defines what your application concept is essentially. Now, coming slightly deeper into the whole part about what this is. So first of all, once your concept is ready and your target audience is set, and you've decided that you want to build on Unity or Unreal, then your application flow is ready, then your intent of the whole application is ready to be executed. Now, once your application intent is ready, there are multiple steps that go into building that entire content. So it starts with, of course, the first thing is UI UX. You need to define how the look and feel and interaction of my application or my content is going to be. Then the second part comes into it is about coding. The second part is actually 3D modeling, wherein you define the different elements which will be embedded within that application, and then you code on top of it to make those objects interactable. Then you take that entire application and you embed it within the software development kit of a particular platform. So say, for example, you choose to build for GeoGlass, then you will integrate that with Geo's SDK. If you choose to build that for Oculus, you will integrate that entire set of UI, UX, 3D modeling and coding within the Oculus SDK. Then you test it on the hardware itself. And that's when, your application is ready to be as a developed content to be published on different platforms. Once your application is ready to be developed, you conduct an entire QA test on it. You conduct the QA with defining that everything that you had decided initially in your application intent is on track and is executed as you had planned. Then you publish your application on the App Store. You run customer trials and you gather insights, and then you decide and iterate based on the insights that you've gathered through the customer trials. And that's when you have a ready product which is ready to be published. So some key elements that you should always keep in mind when you're building any type of content, be it learning content or be it journalistic content, something that you need to understand is that you need to be very sure of what kind of interactions are you using. In AR/VR, there are multiple interaction modes which you can embed within your content. So for example, there's a lot of gaze and dwell. Since everything that you're seeing through your eyes, you can say, for example, focus on a particular element within that content and then wait for it to load, and that will become interactable. Then there's a lot of interaction that happens through controller, and then there's interaction that happens through voice and happens through hands. So there are 4 modes of interaction that you can use to play around with the content in your application. The second is features. So you have to ensure that it's socially collaborative. There are it's accessible to multiple people, so that, say for example, if I'm interacting within that space itself, I want other people within that space to be able to see and understand what I'm doing, which is where the global leaderboard comes in and multiple features come in. We want teleportation to happen within that same environment. We want rotation and cool animations and spinning of the models. We want a smooth onboarding when we talk about content. We want it to be playable. We need the onboarding to be easy, and a tutorial to help us understand how to interact with that same content. Of course, when you're conducting QA, then you need to ensure that there are no bugs within the content itself. The graphics by default have to be high quality. The audio has to be great. Has to be clarity in flow of the content. You need to constantly think about how to refresh that content and how to keep it active, how to ensure that there are a continuous flow of users coming into your application that you've created. Now coming to the main part of this whole presentation, which is the impact of AR/VR on journalism. So I'm sure what not just on journalism, but on any sort of content that people consume through AR/VR, it gives you a very deeper context. So what it happens is that it allows journalists to basically create a space within which the user is able to embed themselves. So the user is not just like passively consuming the content, but as part of the whole immersion, they are actually be able to drive the experience themselves, which gives them a deeper context as to what the storyline is about. So, when we talk about, say, learning content, I'll give an example. We have about 500 modules of CBSE and NCERT aligned content on GeoGlass. There is an 80% retention rate when it comes to content in XR. So imagine if that's the kind of impact which is having on simple, CBSE aligned content, the kind of, impact that it will also have on, say, a journalistic idea that you have conceptualized and put through in a metaverse format. There is higher empathy. So for example, when instead of just, reading or watching a video of somebody on a 2D screen, when a person is immersed in a 3D environment, with that content, it creates like a higher empathy. So for example, if I am in a war zone and I have shot the video, I've shot a 360 format content from the perspective of a soldier who's on the front line. What that gives the user an understanding is that the kind of difficulties or the kind of stress or the kind of perils that a person that a fighter has to go through when they are in the battlefield itself, which they may not be able to understand if they're only reading about it, say, on a 2D screen. Then we have accessible and engaging information. So as you can imagine, most of the content in AR VR is in a 3D format. It's basically 3D elements which are floating around in your space. What that helps you do is that it's accessible through any of the HMDs, but it's also interactable. So when that content becomes easy for you to interact with, it also becomes a lot more engaging for you to play around with. Now, if you as a user are engaging with that content in itself, then your retention and your understanding of that same content becomes very easy. Breaking barriers between the audience. What happens in this case is that with 2D content, there's always this barrier between the user and the audience in itself. And what XR essentially ends up doing is that it ends up breaking this barrier and makes it very easy for people to consume content. It makes it very easy for users to become very active in the news making process itself, rather than being just passive consumers. And it also makes remote locations accessible. So for example, very easy thing, right? Like something which is very popular on the internet or even on YouTube is something called 360 VR videos. So what they do is that they give you access to locations which are remote, which an average layman consumer will never get access to. So for example, some things that do really well in this space is something like a skydiving space, something like a war zone, something say for example, you're in a wildlife sanctuary, which is which has very limited access to a consumer in general. Now here is some very cool experiences which have already been implemented in AR VR and in the journalism space, which I would love to give you some insights into. These are some that we have personally worked with, some that we have been interacting with for a while. So and some of this content has been built over a period of time. So I'll give you some insights into what each of these kind of exemplifies, and the kind of and this will also give you some ideas as to what you can build as somebody who's a creator and who's looking to build content in the XR space. Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, we are now seeing the FIFA screen.
Okay, perfect. Great. So I'm just going to play this, and this will help you understand what how sports can be visualized in an AR format. Wait. Great. So this was so if anybody of you here is interested in sports journalism, this is a great use case. This is also another great use case wherein if you're familiar with Tour de France, what it does is that, or even FIFA, what they do is that they take in a lot of data points from these sporting events, and they make you view that in a format wherein, say for example, you're in your home, so you can easily scan a QR code and a stadium will appear in front of you, wherein you can understand the heat maps, you can understand the player movements, you can understand statistics, except all of that in an AR format. And what there's a cherry on top of it, wherein we have a commentator which comes in an AR format and kind of gives you that whole understanding of the match in itself, along with those data points, and explains them in detail. So you should check this out sometime. These are links which, if you can see access to, then definitely go check out immersive.io's work. They do a lot of sports interactive content, which can easily be implemented in a journalistics data oriented format. Then we have something called a volumetric capture of President Zelensky. Last year was a very difficult period for Ukraine, and I'm sure when you don't have access to a particular location, it becomes very difficult for people to create and sort of consume content from that location in itself. Now here is where volumetric capture really comes into the whole space. Now if you, for example, have if you're not using your smartphones for this webinar, I will request you all to kind of scan this QR code, and a video of President Zelensky in a volumetric capture format will appear in front of you, and he will be addressing to you as if you are there right in front, as if he's right there from the war zone in front of you. So I'll just take a moment here to give you guys just time to explore this piece of content, where this can really come into use for a lot of journalism. Is where say for example, we had Zelensky who was in Ukraine, and we did not have access to him, yet he came and recorded this whole video. It became viral. This can be used across live news. It can be used across giving access to a lot of people who don't essentially are able to reach the right technology platforms at the right time. And this in itself, for example, if you have Zelensky standing right in front of you and trying to explain to you the kind of ordeals that he's facing while being in the middle of a war, it will help you really understand the kind of pain that he was going through. If that is the kind of empathy that you want to create with a person speaking right in front of you in a screen, this is where volumetric capture as a technology in AR VR comes very handy. So I will take about 2 minutes to just let you explore this, and I will come back and then move to the next one. All right, guys, I'm gonna proceed and show you guys what National Geographic has done for Oculus, wherein they've created an interactive tourism experience, um, for Machu Picchu and for the Antarctic, wherein it's not just a 360 VR video of Machu Picchu, wherein they just basically give you some video to explore, but what they have taken it one notch higher, wherein they make it interactive for you to become an explorer yourself and engage with that kind of a content. So which gives a lot of agency to the user itself, because they're in power of how they want to interact with that content, and yet get the exact kind of a communication and message that you as a journalist want to convey to the user itself. This is a great use case for you to really understand how to create empathy, how to immerse a user in the kind of journalistic content that you are creating. So I'm just going to play this video, but if you have access to, say, Meta Quest 2, or if you want to later put on this video and understand that concept in itself, I think you should definitely do that. So they give a lot of power to the user in itself to become the explorer in itself, and through that they're able to explore in VR how Machu Picchu travel is, or how Antarctica travel is. You're able to click photos, you're able to really understand how it is actually like to become an explorer in itself.
I think the audio isn't playing.
That's okay. That's on mute. But the whole idea here is to really make people a part of the content in itself, which is what the basic tenet of AR VR content development is. Then I want to talk a little bit about, if, say, for example, some of you may be interested in doing daily reporting. So the New York Times did this great initiative wherein some 5-6 years ago, what they did was that they basically, along with their physical newspaper, they gave out some copies of the Google Cardboard, simply with the whole intention that they wanted to basically make people view their content in 360 VR. So they gave access, so they gave cameras, these 360 VR cameras, which are now, like a small ball. It's like a miniaturized version of a big sort of camera that they gave access to their journalists to. And these journalists, these video journalists especially, they took those cameras whenever they were on ground, and they created these small videos and they uploaded them daily, which is why the whole project of theirs was called the Daily 360. Now, if you look at this, imagine the kind of variety of content that they have, like, somebody who is, covering healthcare in VR, somebody who is covering a wedding, say, for example, somebody who's covering the Natural History Museum, somebody who's covering how it is to cope with Alzheimer's, or, how it is like for a Syrian refugee to kind of, come to a different country and then, find their way through it. So any kind of a story that you want, you can, it creates more empathy when you're building that through a V360 VR format. And nowadays cameras are also accessible. So you have access to something called an Insta360, which is, or the GoPro, which both of these are, the kind of cameras which cost almost like, less than, cost somewhere in the range of like, 50,000 rupees, which you will get access to. But with that, you will be able to produce content which can be consumed on a daily basis. So your general ROI with that camera's investment will be higher. Then I definitely want to show you guys something called something which is, the Felix and Paul science documentary. So Felix and Paul is a documentary filmmaking studio, which, they really take, they've been covering Obama through the years. They've been covering the whole, space. So this is the first time that, they've taken 360 VR cameras into the space and really understanding how the journey of an astronaut goes from being on the ground to really being able to, explore their whole, their life, their day-to-day life when they're in the spacecraft, in the space itself. So there are multiple use cases, which can come through when we talk about XR. I have only been able to cover 5 of these in my presentation, but as we, come towards the end of this whole masterclass, I'm very, very happy to discuss with all of you and, validate some of the ideas or some concepts that you may have in your head. Something that I will highly also recommend is that some major use cases which are already prevalent in the AR VR space, like gaming, like, for example, a lot of health and wellness. If you can gamify your existing AR content or a journalistic content, then it makes it very easy for people to be consumed in it, and it becomes a great entry point for people to start consuming your journalistic content. So while you may be applying the same ethics as you apply on a 2D, on a written article or on a video, the same ethics applied on a VR content, but gamified or presented in an interactive format just makes it more memorable. It gives people more empathy, and it makes it very easy for them to understand what is it that they're actually consuming. Your overall impact of the story will improve if you start using AR and VR more in your content. So yes, coming to something which everybody is kind of concerned about, which is, of course, once you've created this kind of a content and you've decided that this is the use case that I want to put it forward with, how do I actually monetize my XR content? So there are a couple of ways which are kind of proven so far. Given that, of course, this whole space is not in the mainstream immediately, but with the kind of resources and the kind of developments that we have made, what I can suggest to you is that you can partner with a lot of XR platform companies. So for example, there is Oculus, there is us, there is HTC, there is Unreal, right? So all of these are platform companies which are always in need of content. If you are able to come up with a really great, say, application idea or a journalistic story or a 360 VR documentary that you have created, but you want to popularize it, then you can reach out to any of these platform companies, and you can give them the whole proposition of licensing it. You can give them the whole idea of taking it up on an MG basis. Then telcos, with 5G, of course, coming to the forefront, every 5G company, every telecom is looking for content that they can bank upon and upsell their 4G to 5G. So in order to do that, they're looking for content, especially AR VR content, which will really require users to spend that kind of a bandwidth, and that only happens through like AR VR content, which is built in a long form format. So for example, if you're currently producing a video in video in your journalistic format, if the same video can be now converted to a 360 VR video, you will be in a better position to be upsell your content. Then say for example, you're part of a news organization. They are of course looking for there are branded and sponsored partnerships that your sales team often kind of takes care of. What you can do is that you can go and suggest and pitch ideas to these partnerships, and you can, because even these brands and these sponsored partners, they are looking for innovative ways to kind of upsell their content, right? So if you're able to kind of come up with new ideas that this is how I want to do, like say for example, you want to do a food journalism project. Now instead of writing a blog about it or making a video out of it, say for example, you are able to recreate certain recipes and explain it to them in an AR format, where the user is able to see the entire recipe and the ingredients in an AR format right in front of them. And there's a journalist which is in an avatar format, kind of explaining the whole cooking process to them. Then and they're able to see the content overlaid with the real environment and cook side by side. It just enhances the whole experience and makes you think that wow, this was so impactful. Like I wish that I could continue consuming content in that same format. Then if, for example, ad monetization is not currently available on any HMD platform, however, ad monetization is definitely available on mobile AR. So for example, if you end up creating an application on AR Core, AR Kit, which is Google and Apple's AR development platforms, then you will be able to publish them and earn revenue through your existing monetization methods through the Play Store and App Store. And of course, if not, the last option that you have is that you create very intense research-backed, engaging content and put it behind a paywall on any of the existing platforms, and you will be able to earn revenue through it. The Nat Geo experience, the National Geographic experience that I showed to you, was actually the last option, wherein you have to pay about $10 to be able to experience that content. So yes, in conclusion, what I would definitely like to recommend to all of you is that XR is here to stay. Like, sure, people, there are critics all over the world trying to tell you that it's not happening, it's not there yet, it will take some time. Of course, it will take time. Smartphones also took their sweet time to, come to a stage where we can't even, like, think about sleeping without them. So metaverse is definitely, or AR, VR is going to come there. You should think about it as a new digital channel for your brand. You should, because immersive technology in general gives your readers a lot more context. You will see the kind, if your users are able to get more context and understanding out of your content, then they will obviously be more involved and invested into reading more of that content and be willing to pay you money for that content as well. Then second comes about, so now that you're interested in basically building content for AR, VR, the second thing that you should consider is, do I have the right skill sets, the technical skill sets to be able to build this kind of a content? So either you learn to kind of build with platforms like Unity, Unreal, WebXR, or AR Core, AR Kit, or some of the existing platforms. Or if you don't, then and if you're a newsroom and you have the right budgets with you, then you should definitely hire a product team with the right skill sets that can build the right content for you. The third thing that you should do is you should choose the proper hardware and the platform to publish your content. If, for example, and really build towards that platform in itself. So you should know which is the leading platform in this industry, which is where the maximum number of audiences are, and then use sort of like, that particular platform to really exaggerate your content. And of course, like, once you've decided which kind of, you have the skill set, you've decided what kind of content to publish, something that you should, really take care of when you're creating content in the AR VR space is that people are still new to it. To them, it's nothing to do with AR, VR, or, to be very honest, AR Core or Unity, Unreal, or C#, C++, UI, UX. No, nobody in the consumer space really understands any of these jargons anyway. So what you should really focus on is to, like, just explain the whole onboarding process to them very easily. You should make it so easy for them to understand what is it that they're experiencing, how is it that they should experience, what is the impact that they will be able to experience through that content, rather than telling them that this is an AR experience and that is why you should experience it. If you can explain to them how they will feel and by kind of consuming that content, I think that is how you will be very easily be able to penetrate the audience through your XR experiences. Then of course, at this point in time, to make your XR content monetizable, you should be able to seek sponsorships. You should be able to partner with the right kind of a platform company or a telecom company or the right brands to be able to put your projects into action. You should use a lot of social media for both customer trials and to be able to reach a broader audience. And of course, content is content, but journalism is an entirely different industry, so which comes with its own set of ethics. Like, you cannot kind of manipulate a story, you cannot manipulate a person's viewpoint, or how what you're seeing in front of you has to be kind of implemented the way to be able to give the user exactly what was happening on ground, which is the core of why people consume journalism content in the first place anyway. So that has to be maintained, and that that has to be embedded within the content that you're creating. And of course, if you don't use AR VR, then you should definitely start using it. You should get active. You should start buying some of these devices. You should start consuming more of this content. You should be able to understand what people are using it for, and then take some of your stories, your journalistic stories, and embed it into that same format. So yes, thank you. That's that from my side. Happy to take up some questions from all of you, and I hope you all got like a good understanding of what the metaverse is, how platforms are built, how content creation takes place in the whole XR industry, how you can sort of embed journalism into AR VR, what is the kind of monetization options which are available to you, how you can get started. And if nothing else, like this is a very this is probably our first session, which is discussing the basics of the whole industry. This is just probably like 5% of what the space is about. We can in the subsequent sessions talk deeper about specific platforms like HMDs, like like native platforms like Oculus or GeoGlass, and then we can talk about how mobile XR takes place, how we should talk about only healthcare use cases, how gaming is so impactful in bringing users into an interactive 3D space, etc. So yes, I'm very glad to be able to do this session with all of you. I hope this gives you some sense of interest and enthusiasm as to how you can start inculcating some metaverse elements into your journalism. And if you have ideas, happy to discuss them more in the Q&A.
Thank you so much, Yoshika. These were some really brilliant insights, and thank you for sharing your knowledge with us. There's so much that we need to look forward to in the field of journalism with so much of emerging technology. So thank you once again. And now let's move on to the Q&A. There's a good question that's come up is, I'm a student of journalism, and with all the paradigm shifts and all these emerging technologies, how does one keep aware of what's changing, and how do you stay with these changing trends? How do you keep up with all of this?
I think it has so much to do with interest. But I guess, when there are certain moments in history when, there are certain technologies that really take the uptick. So last year, when Meta changed when Facebook changed its name to Meta, it really showed that it really shows that there is a company which is a big tech. It's one of the major big tech companies, and they're willing to invest like almost $10 billion into an industry like this. It shows that there's movement in that space. So you should really keep yourself aware of such technological developments. And once that happens, and plus last year there was this whole craze of NFTs and crypto sort of coming together, and which was kind of defining what the metaverse is, to be very honest. But in my definition, and somebody who's been working in this space, sure, that's an element of the metaverse, but that's not the metaverse in its own self. Metaverse is really about being able to wear different kind of devices and a lot of interoperability, a lot of sense of presence, and that makes people involved and aware in the different environment altogether. It's becoming one with that kind of a technology. So it's just, my only suggestion is that there are certain technological keywords or buzzwords which are going around the whole market, which is metaverse, AI, ML, etc., etc. So just, and so if any of these really capture your interest, or is there's something which really makes you feel excited about, you should definitely follow that space. And you should, believe me, the internet is a beautiful thing which will give you access to so much that that you'll be amazed by what all is available there. And then of course you can use your own thinking and imagination and your own ideation to basically derive from what's there on the internet and build on top of it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And here's another question, which could probably relook at how workspaces and work happens. So the student wants to know, let's say if an employee wants to report certain insights or present a report, or if an entrepreneur wants to give a presentation, or if a professor wants to present his recent findings from a research, how does AR and VR come into this, or how could any technology make this even better?
Just a moment. I'm very sorry. I need to stop my screen share, and I need to be able to
Sure.
see the chat screen. Yeah. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Sorry, Claston. Could you please repeat that question?
Yeah. So we're talking about changing of workplaces. Let's say an employee wants to present a report or some insights, an entrepreneur wants to make a presentation, or let's say a professor wants to present the recent findings from his research. So how could AR, VR, or any kind of technology enhance this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, say for example, something which is a platform which is very accessible to you is called mobile AR VR. So there are multiple platforms which are kind of no-code tools like Clipart, then you have Eighth Wall, and then you have Geometry. So what you're able to do is that however you want to present it, right, you can easily take that and build it into a 3D format. And then you can create an entire application on it. Believe me, it won't take you more than 1 hour to do that. And through that application, you can share that as a link or as one of the QR codes that I've showed during my presentation, and share that with whoever you want to be able to present that to. What that will help you is that if there is data, then that will become engaging. It will become interactive. There are 3D models. Say, for example, you're a professor who is very much keen to show how a heart works. Then the 3D model of the heart will come in front of the user in an immersive format, and you'll be able to engage and play around with it. So there are different playable, interactive kind of elements that you can use within your presentation, which will, of course, increase the retention of whatever it is that you're trying to convey to the person whom you're giving the presentation to.
Yeah, thank you. That's truly thrilling times that we live in, changing the whole education experiences and how we see everything in the world. Yes, another question, which is slightly technical. Do we need any special editing softwares to edit videos, shoot of event, wedding, or anything when it's meant to be for AR, VR? Does Insta360 work to get the best output, or is there anything else?
We do have certain, so basically when I was building 360 content, then I was using the this thing, Adobe Premiere Pro itself for editing the content. But there are multiple tools out there, which you can use to edit that content in itself. Give me a moment, I have a list of it, so I'll just share that with you.
Sure.
So yes, I basically used to use Adobe Premiere Pro itself, but there is VR which you can use, and then there is Final Cut Pro that you can also use to edit your videos.
Right. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
So moving on to the next question, what do you think are some of the key trends in the industry, and what's the scope of journalism with keeping in mind the newer trends?
So something that you can very easily get started with is mobile AR VR. Mobile AR is something. So for example, Blippar did this very cool experience with BBC, wherein I'll show you one second. So mobile AR is something that you can get started with. What my recommendation to something make it engaging would be to gamify it. Build anything which is in a gamified format to help people understand the concept and the true potential of what AR VR can do. That is when I think the kind of trend that you should really pick up on.
Right. Okay. Here's a question from our very own Dr. Nilay. He asked, is it possible to augment an existing news item into an AR VR XR story as kind of an extra material?
That you can do, but honestly, it's not going to give you that kind of an impact. I mean, honestly, we have, so for example, if you know about this brand called Amar Chitra Katha, right? So Amar Chitra Katha is very popular with comic books. Now, what they have done is they have just created like a big screen version of that comics, right? And when people look at it, they're like, "Haan, theek hai ye, but like, I'm already like when I'm reading this in the comics, so why do I have to read it in a big format?" Of course, it becomes like a Kindle, where say for example, people who have eye problems, that they can view that content on a big screen and be able to read it. But that's the only use case that you will be able to provide through some of your existing content, which is in a written format or in a video format. To really be able to make that content engaging and to be able to create impact with that content, I will highly recommend to be able to build it in a way wherein you're making people a part of that story rather than just passively consuming it in another AR format.
Right, great. Here's another interesting question. Now let's talk about AR, VR in journalism, and you're talking about news reportage. And on the other hand, we have India that lives in a villages, 70% is rural area. So how could you take this AR, VR experiences into our rural or our hinterlands of the country?
So a couple of things. Mobile penetration is still very high in India. So if you're able to create mobile AR experiences, be it even if Android, which is definitely has a higher penetration in rural India, then that experience can still be kind of like given accessibility to a person who's in a village in an AR format. They will still be able to see it. The only the only kind of the hindrance that we will face there is that for them, the smartphone is probably simply about just making a phone call, or it's about Google or Facebook, which is so easy for them to kind of scroll through, and or WhatsApp, right? But it's also about that knowledge, right? Or that communication which goes out to them, that hey, there's something called an AR kind of an application that we've created, this is how you can download it, this is what it will help you do, and this is what help you learn. But I guess that is that ability to impart that knowledge and awareness to somebody who's in the rural area is the first challenge. The second thing is the AR experience going to be accessible to them? And then, how will they actually react when they see that content in itself? So yes, there are possibilities through mobile that, you can make it reach a wider audience. And of course, when Geo kind of launches Geo Glass, that's also a given within the whole ecosystem, that we launch it at a price point which is accessible and affordable and available to the the lowest kind of paying customer that Geo has. So that will definitely increase the penetration of HMDs also in the Indian market.
Thank you so much. And let's move on to the last question for today. With all the new technology in journalism and it booming in terms of what you're going to do next, do you see a lot of new job roles that didn't exist before in journalism?
Yeah, definitely. So for example, how like 5 years ago, video started really taking an uptick, right? Like so far it was only, say, like, written format journalism, then people moved on to data and video journalism. So similarly, now there'll be a growth of a lot of XR journalists also, who will be primarily kind of working on immersive journalism projects, like, who will kind of say story is a story, right? Like it can be just represented in any format you want to. You can write it, you can create a video out of it, and you can also create an immersive experience out of it. So there will be a new breed of journalists called immersive journalists or XR journalists who will be primarily involved in ideating on how I can present the story in a format which makes the user immersed in that story in itself, and which makes the engagement and retention higher using 3D elements, using 3D models, and UI UX that encompasses them within an immersive format.
All right, Ishika, I think that's about it for the Q&A. And again, we would like to thank you very much, and we really appreciate taking out time and talking to us. I'm sure we have a lot to take back today from all that you've shared with us, and looking forward to the future of journalism.
Definitely. I mean, I will highly recommend, it's a new space, and I know it's not familiar to everybody. But, I think like for me too, right? Like I was a journalist before I entered the XR industry, but I've learned so much over the last year. And, this is still a time in the whole AR/VR industry where there are no rules which are set in place. So if you start early on in this industry, you get to be part of somebody who can create those rules. Who can set the stage for the launch of journalism in AR/VR and really learn the technical skills, or you can, start, even if you don't have the technical skills, you can work with somebody who has the product knowledge, and you can be the person with the creative ideas and execute them. So, in whichever capacity you feel comfortable, definitely start getting involved in this space and then in this industry, and it will definitely help you, because this is the future. This is how people will consume content irrespective in the next few years. So the earlier you start, the better it is going to be for you.
Thank you, Ishika. So let's sign off for now.
Yes,
and
thank you.
I'm just sharing the details of the institute for the other students, right? And I'm also putting in the chat box, and you can come visit us, or you can come make inquiry on the email ID provided along with the phone number.